Welcome back to the Capitol Rundown. We're going to stay on the topic of the 2022 midterm elections this morning. This week, the Rundown's Andrew Burkle sat down with ABC News political director Rick Klein to talk about how this year's election will be different from 2020. Take a listen.
Thanks for joining us today, Rick. And I want to start with talking a little bit about elections here in the United States, especially in light of 2020 and some of the stuff that happened post-elections in 2020. Obviously, we have a big election coming up here in Michigan with Governor Whitmer on the ballot. But how do you think elections as a whole are going to play out over the next year?
It's going to be a tense time. We've heard from a lot of jurisdictions that have a hard time finding election workers. We know a number of states have changed their election laws in significant ways, and many states, including Michigan, have been locked in these pitched partisan battles over the last election. So not having that settled and going into 2022 and then maybe even 2024 with this additional uncertainty, I think a lot of people are on edge about the sanctity, the safety, the security of elections, and the concerns about whether those results are going to be accepted or not. I think it is now almost inevitable that we're going to have politically charged battles over election results and a lot of confusion around the very process of voting in addition to everything else.
I mentioned Governor Whitmer here in Michigan. Obviously, she was a vice president candidate at one time for President Biden. She is obviously on the ticket here coming up. Is her election going to be sort of an indictment or how people are feeling about President Biden here in 2022?
I think it's hard for any Democrat to separate him or herself from Biden and the Democrats in Washington. I think governors may be better positioned to do that, but the fact that Governor Whitmer was on that short list changes that. The fact that Michigan was as closely contested a presidential state in 2016 and then in 2020, I think makes that more difficult as well. I think it's easy to overread what the national mood is based on any election, and a governor has his or her own record to run on. But I do think that we're going to look at the results in Michigan as something of a barometer going into 2024. Where does the Democratic Party stand? How do Democrats fare up and down the ballot? And that, of course, starts with Governor Whitmer.
Some of the stuff with inflation and gas prices, regarding that stuff, are experts saying that is something that was sort of set up for President Biden, with the whole pandemic in 2020? Or do experts sort of think that some of that stuff had to do with his policies?
Well, I think it's complicated, and I think the fact that the economy was reopening right around the time that President Biden took office meant that you were going to have some challenges around the supply chain as well as inflation. We've also seen a lot of new spending. We saw even some Democratic economists worry early on in the Biden years that this would only fuel the inflation. But that sets up a strange situation where the economy, by any objective measure, is quite strong under Biden, but people don't feel it. And what they do feel is gas prices and inflation and higher prices every time they do things, and that is added to a sense of unease, a jittery sense that around the economy, and I think a lot of misperceptions around the economy. And I think the White House has to choose: do you try to argue with people's perceptions, or do you try to address the concerns that they have? And that's not easily done. I think whether it's gas prices or inflation or the supply chain, these are long-term trends that come into play, and a limited number of things that even a president can do about them.
Well, there's still more ahead this morning. Up next, we take a look at a movement by some members of Congress that would govern themselves and their colleagues when it comes to trading stocks. We'll tell you why they say this change is necessary when the Capitol Rundown comes right back.